Good evening and Spill Glimmers, and welcome back to another episode. Alexandru, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Welcome back to the studio.
Always a pleasure.
So, Continentals are just around the corner. You're about to leave, actually.
72 hours from my departure, yes.
So, we thought we would make a quick recap, what to expect, what happened at the Europeans, and see what we're expecting. So, how was the last month for you following the European Continentals?
You want the truth?
Yeah.
It has been like a total blur. Like I want to say I've tested a lot, but I haven't done like a really focused testing. I've been the training dummy a lot in our training sessions, playing the big archetype decks. Like the main decks we are waiting to see over there, and just being like the bad guy, you know, the guy you run into to see if the deck has legs and whatnot.
Yeah, let's run it against blue red. Let's run it against green steel. Let's run it again.
We're gonna say what we expect seeing at the North American. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but yeah, there are some decks that we tested a lot more against.
Obviously. So basically it feels a little bit like on the local scene we feel preparing for the set championship. Everything in the meta is up in the air. It's
because you know, I feel that the European Continentals is not really representative. I want to say it's been a month, you know.
Yeah.
People have adapted and things have changed. Some decks, I'm gonna tell you about it in the presentation. Some decks are not really there anymore. Some of them have kind of risen up and weren't really there in Europe. So we can probably try and wrap up Europe first and
sure,
and remind people what it was about. We had a video about it. We will not release it because we're kind of late about it. But the main takeaway is in Europe there were a lot of blue-red, so of ruby, sapphire. This was obviously the most popular deck.
Most of the field, yeah.
Yeah, it was 35% of the field. It was gigantic. If you were ready against blue-red, you will be having a good tournament, which is what happened for the people that were bringing Ruby Amethyst. There were only 8% of the field bringing Ruby Amethyst at this tournament in Europe, and they did amazingly. They had the best conversion rate in the whole field. Most of them were in day 2. They actually, one of the persons on the deck actually won the whole tournament.
Yep.
You know, just perpetuating the meme of red purple is the forever deck in Lorcana.
I mean, plus they had gotten the Genie.
Yes, Genie was one of the main additions to the deck. The finals was red purple against green purple, which was also a Genie deck. But this is kind of the thing. Green purple has been really, really popular over in Europe. I think it's an Artabax kind of thing that he has been really heralding the archetype over there. And I want to say it might not really be the case in the US.
Not as popular, for sure.
I will be touching upon it, but since the European Continentals, where blue-red was super popular, obviously with the big win for red purple has started being really, really popular.
Mm-hmm.
But also a deck that wasn't really there and that is really kind of, I want to say, generally popular in Europe is Steel Song. And Steel Song has come back, but also kind of transformed.
And just before we touch on that deck, the main data for that is a 10K tournament that happened, I think, 2 weeks after Europe.
Yeah, if I remember, is the Charlie Showcase collectible or either Southside Gaming. Those are the two big stores that run couple K tournaments on a 2-day spread. We've had one, and we will have one after the Continentals. Yep. So these guys are running big tournaments with data that is really, really relevant. Big players show up there. And this is what we were coming to. I was saying that Steel Song kind of transformed.
Yep.
We had the arrival of Ember Steel Dwarves Mine piloted by Brendan DiCandio. Brendan DiCandio, who is a household name in Lorcana. He's a great player. He's a good friend of Kevin's, one of my teammates. He made a big name for himself in Magic. Like, his introduction is already made. So he won that whole 10K tournament with Amber Steel, Dwarves Mine, kind of cementing the deck's grasp on the format. It's a new aggro deck of choice, I want to say.
Definitely a good matchup against Ruby Amethyst, which was the most popular deck at the 10K because of the win in Europe.
Exactly, and also like it's an aggro deck. You tend to just slip like underneath the big control decks and just do well against them in general.
In general,
especially when they're not prepared for it, because it was kind of a new thing at that tournament. As of now, it's maybe more of a known value. I'm gonna also touch upon it in the presentation. So I think this kind of summarizes the last month of Lorcana for us here. What we've had, like these big tournaments, the European Continentals, and now what do we have to expect for the North American Continentals?
Yeah.
So I've broken down like this presentation in, I want to say, 5.5 sections. The last section is just more of like food for thought, because I can't really like speculate on what will be there. However, the first deck I want to talk about for the North American Continentals is, to no one's surprise, Ruby Amethyst. This is my...
Yeah, Ruby Amethyst.
You see, we've chosen the banners for it.
So, yeah, obviously the most...
iconic deck.
Iconic deck, but also the most expected deck, I guess, that people who don't know what they're going to be running will probably just default to Ruby Amethyst. Has done well since day one, still does fairly well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, it will really reward people that are really good with it, but will also, like, carry you a little bit, I want to say. Sometimes when you're not exactly sure against what you're playing against a field that is probably a bit more hostile, sometimes the deck will just do its thing and just carry you up with it. This is why I expect it to be maybe a 15 to 20% of the metagame share over there. If it's lower than that, I would be really baffled. If it's higher than that, it might be by a couple percent. I cannot say that I would be expecting a 35% showing of Ruby Amethyst. That would be kind of egregious to me.
Yeah.
It would really, really skew the whole metagame. So as we said, like it won in the in Europe at the Europe Continentals, and the deck doesn't need any introduction. It's a mid-range value deck. It has a good like early game with the likes of Flynn Rider and Sisu, the 3 ink Sisu Inkable that gains strength equal to the number of cards in your opponent's hand. Mm-hmm. It has a good mid game plan with Madam Mim Fox, with Genie, with Rabbit. So just like kind of gathering effectives. And it has a great late game plan with Merlin Goat, just bouncing it and gathering a lot of lore out of it. Be prepared. That is kind of the reset button. When they need to, go into panic mode, just clear the board and just slam something and then run away with the game. Especially now with Genie, this is something that they do really, really well.
And more recently, the inclusion of the bigger Sisu, like the one we used to see in Red Blue, because... well, the mirror runs a lot of 2 and lower power characters, so it's a really good one-side board wipe against the mirror, against a lot of the aggro plays, even though Steel now runs a little bit more of Calhoun, Smee, and all of those 3 power, but very, very low power heavy boards these days in the matchups.
Yeah, because it quests for 3. Back in the day, it was dodging a lot of song and non-character hate, such as Ursula, Deceiver, such as Bare Necessities, and all of that. So you were able to just kind of trim down on your be prepared to have the Sisu that was doing effectively the same job. I would say for sure it's not as effective as it is in the blue-red deck, where you have ways to play with the strength of your opponent's character. Yeah. So I would say in my vision, the deck is generally really favored against Ruby Sapphire. This is why it has done so well in Europe, where the field was mostly Ruby Sapphire. But I would say it was kind of weaker to the Amber Steel variants. I want to say more to Steel Song, which is another value deck that can kind of go beneath it. While if you're more prepared for the Dwarven Mine matchup, you can kind of tailor your play patterns to be able to keep up with them. Like depending on if they have the mine, you will just like keep stuff like Madam Mim Fox to challenge the mine and take them off of it. The damage they shoot at you with the mine is not as great because you probably are not playing the Flynn Rider game. You're probably playing a more like mid-range to late game. So, if you are just like aware of the aggro matchup, you might have an easier time against it than against like the mid-range more value that goes bigger from Steel Song that has historically been like good matchup into red purple.
Also, I have to say I've seen an uptick in red purple of the both Beaking Undisputed and Lady Tremaine cutting on some of the Medusas to answer some of the threats that Big Sisu or Brawl are not able to answer in the current meta.
Exactly. So, and that's the thing. The deck is so, I want to say, malleable. Like, you can just kind of tweak it out for what you're expecting to see on a given weekend. So, I think this will be a deck that will really reward people that have read the metagame really well, that have, like, anticipated what people will be bringing to the Continentals, because the field is actually kind of small. It's only 128 people. Yep. So, I want to say like those macro archetypes we're touching upon here are probably gonna be like the thing people are gonna be playing against all throughout the weekend.
Yeah, you'll see the outliers probably more at the LCQs or last chance qualifiers than at the main 128 people tournament.
Probably. And just to wrap things up, for every archetype, I've just selected a few key cards we've named already during the presentation. We have Genie, Wish Fulfilled, which is the new addition from Set 6 that it has completely like skyrocketed the deck against some of their matchups, their old bad matchups. Again, Be Prepared is a huge player. And then I have to name like Merlin Goat and Madam Mim Fox, that is the general like 1-2 punch to just like start doing your main thing,
Yeah.
So,
and a little sparkle of the White Rose that somehow people slide in to be a little bit more, I don't want to say aggro, but finish up those matchups against like blue-red, where you're looking for that last point desperately and having those extra 1 or 2 goats in the deck.
Yeah, I've historically seen the White Rose in other kind of decks that I'm gonna name, but yeah, I've seen people trying to gain lore out of nowhere. That's how we call it.
Yeah.
Because this has kind of been a thing in Lorcana for the past few sets, where you probably want to have some ways to just gain lore without questing. This is something big, and some decks are really bad at dealing with it, because you cannot really cut people off from these strategies except with like very good hand reads or hand disruption, whole new world, well placed whole new worlds.
Yeah, which is no longer really a card right now in the meta. So,
well, it's kind of coming back. Yeah. I'm gonna name it as soon as we get to it, but it's not as popular as it used to be. That's
exactly.
For sure.
So bringing us to our second main archetype, if you're not playing Ruby Amethyst and you're not playing aggro, you're probably playing Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah, you have 3 choices, and if you set control in one of these 3 choices, you are right. It's Ruby Sapphire. Again, I expect it to be, about 15 to 20% of the metagame. it is gonna still be popular. People have adapted it. They have like a lot of I want to say fervent believers, zealous combatants such as Sailor, that's a good friend of the channel here. That we kind of know he's gonna be bringing this. If he's not, I'm probably gonna let out a big scream in the hall on that day. I'm gonna be like, what's happening here? What universe is this?
The gasp will be audible on stream.
Exactly. So, blue red, the marquee control deck, really just drawing cards, wiping the board, removing opposing threats until you can establish your own threat that will run away with the game eventually. It was the most played deck, as I said, in Europe. There were kind of like variants running around in Europe. I've seen people playing like Flynn Rider and the three ink Sisu, the inkable one, making it more like a hybrid between red purple and blue red, but you still had some of that blue red high end finisher and whatnot. It was quite interesting to see. It actually was first after the first day of competition. Sadly, that player lost in the top 16 and did not make the cut to top 8. But I think his deck was actually quite well tuned for the tournament, and he just didn't run into blue red in his top 16. So you cannot win them all.
Exactly.
So what I wanted to say about Ruby Sapphire is that historically it has been demolishing non-purple mid-range decks. So Steel Song is gonna still be very, very rough running into it. Though sometimes Dwarven Mine, the Ember Steel Dwarven Mine variant, will be able to just slide under and get the W with a good mixture of like high quest low bodies, going very, very wide before to be prepared, going wide before the Sisu, because even if they try to shift the Sisu onto the Daring Visitor, you'll be able to deal with the Daring Visitor if you have a mine in play.
Yeah.
You're also running like some other songs that generally Steel is running to be able to deal with the opposing board. So it is that. So I think mine doesn't have such a bad matchup going into it, though you will have a rough time playing against Ruby Amethyst, especially with the Genie that is now a really big really big threat. It just goes so fast. It quests for 2, gives you replaces it with by giving you a card. It's evasive. You cannot just go on challenging it. You really need one of your new key cards that I'm gonna be naming soon to be able to deal with it cleanly. If it's not brawl or ice blocking, and so that's about it. I think
it's a 4 toughness buddy.
It's 4 toughness. It is quite big, So I'm gonna name the key cards from that archetype because I think we don't need to spend more time telling you what this deck does in general. It has been there solidly since set number 3, but there were some people already kind of experimenting with it in set number 2, if you remember.
Yep.
It just got its best tools in set number 3. So the key cards I want to name for blue red is Sisu Empowered Sibling, which is their big 5/4 dragon that will one side wrath the board. But their new addition that I was telling you about to deal with genies is Maui Half Shark, which is a really interesting card. I love that card to bits. It's tremendously large. It's a 7/5 evasive that is going to gain you a lore every time you play an action and regrow you an action from your discard pile when it challenges. So it's like a win-win against genies. You're just I'm picking off genies and then just gathering momentum with those actions. Other cards that the deck will be running and are kind of marquee to it is Sail the Azurite Sea, Sailor's invitational card, I like to call it. And lastly, Hiram Flaversham, toy maker that has been making like ravages ever since it has been printed in set number 2, drawing all of the cards, all of them.
There's also 2, not new cards, but new additions to the deck that are a lot more reactive and that I kind of like their playability. We're seeing a little bit more of Vitalisphere than we used to in order to be able to drop, say, that Maui and give it Rush. I was about to say haste, but give it Rush. And the other one, which is a lot more surprising to me, but really, really synergizes well with Maui, is A Pirate's Life.
A Pirate's Life is a huge card. I don't remember if this video. I think this video came out for us when we were trying the new decks in the set number 6,
Yep.
where I was playing a really sailor adjacent list with Maui Sharks, and I was just like desperate on board. You had an engine going in green purple, and I wasn't able to challenge any of your guys. If not, I was just losing the board and losing on lore at the drop of the hat, and I just like play Maui, sing A Pirate's Life, and then just start going from there and win from there, which was like, and you were in a winning position before that play, so that was.
And being able to recycle that Pirate's Life with Maui, with Maui is just.
Yeah, you're eventually gonna win really fast, even though the Maui only quests for 1. It generates you an extra lore every time you play the action, so you're swinging like you're effectively gaining 4 lore every turn and also draining your opponent for 2. So it's a 6 lore swing per turn. It's absolutely tremendous.
And it takes the wind out of any kind of aggressive strategies sell, like even the mid-range. At that point, when you're draining 2 per turn, it's like, how are you going to win it back without a board?
Yeah, I was testing some mid-range games where I was like at 17, 18. I was like, okay, I just need to have something sticking to the board and questing once, and I'm done with this game, which is like a bad matchup for mid-range in general.
Yep.
And then they just like Maui Shark, because they have like a bajillion ink at this point. Maui Shark, Pirate's Life, they get room to breathe, and then they start like, oh, Sisu, brawl your thing, kill your other thing,
Draw 5 cards.
Yeah, and and you're like, with your board empty, they're now in a winning position, even if they're trailing from behind. I'm now on like 15, 16, not being able to close that gap. That's, the deck really comes back from behind. I think we've done videos on the deck, but like it really plays very well, even though it's trailing. It definitely can be sliding the win right from under you.
And now we've done Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Sapphire. We're missing scissors.
Yeah.
In this rock, paper, scissor.
So, to no surprise, because we named it from the beginning of the video, Steel Song and Dwarven Mind. I put them together because both of these archetypes are from the Ember Steel variant. They're going to be playing, I don't know if I remember correctly, by building both decks, about 35 to 40 cards that are kind of shared between both. So it's really sometimes the engine that switches. Dwarven Mind will be playing more of the dwarves, so Happy will be playing Doc, we'll be playing the Mind. We'll be renaming those cards as key cards of the deck, whilst the Steel Song will probably be playing more of Aerials, of Whole New World, because it's not all the way gone. You said it was, we didn't see it that much. The other interesting thing to say is that there's kind of an in-between version, too. I call it Ember Steel Aggro. It's not. It's actually just halfway between the two decks, where you're not running Aerial, you're not running A Whole New World, you're not running the whole Song package. You're only running String of Raging Fire and Let the Storm Rage on as cheap removal. But you're not running the dwarves and you're not running the mine as an engine. So that's what I call Ember Steel Aggro. And this is like, any choice is good they all have their merits. Sometimes you go searching for some points in certain matchups by selecting the right version with the right, I want to say, cards, tech cards against each of the matchups. So it's weird for me to say, because like the way I've written it in our notes here is like it's the new rising star. It's not new by any means. Steel Song has been around forever,
but that had been called following the European Championship.
Exactly. It was completely, I want to say absent, but almost like there were no like super relevant Steel Song finishes in that tournament.
No.
So, and also we can name like the mine version as pretty new, because you're building your deck quite differently. You're still playing the good Ember and Steel cards, but you're really relying more on Daisy. You're relying more on, like I said, the dwarves. You have some things like Lawrence's. Your draw engine is more Rapunzel based. You're never gonna just draw 7. The most you're gonna draw is 2 off your dock or 3 of your Rapunzel on some of your large guys, and that's about it. So that's a cool thing about these two decks. What I've found in my testing is like they have good matchups all around, except maybe for Ruby Sapphire for the Steel Song variant. Mm-hmm. And like I said, when you're Dwarven Mine, sometimes you're just gonna slide under and just destroy your opponent out of nowhere. And this is what makes it the best aggro deck in the field right now, in my opinion. There's another aggro deck that we're gonna be touching upon just after this one, but I feel that Dwarven Mine has such a powerful engine that it just is able to churn and churn and churn to the finish line really rapidly, even against like decks that are really good at just like managing your board.
And in your opinion, because traditionally for the past 2 to 3 sets, right, the 1-drops for that were Cinderella, Robin, and then Big Robin, sometimes the Beast, playing a lot with that. With all of the current power-based removal, do you think we're due to see the return of the Queen, with being a 4/3 on turn 2 that cannot be brawled, cannot be Sisu'd, has a harder time with the ice block? Like, do you think she might have her chance for a comeback?
I'm gonna say in all of our testing, this was not something that was considered.
Huh.
Most of the lists are not running the Queen. I think it's a very interesting point because, and I feel kind of silly saying that we haven't considered it, because it still feels like a cool inclusion. I'm just gonna come back to what we were saying when we designed our Quebec Steel Song in set number 4, and why we weren't playing the Queen at that time. The fact is, when you're not shifting her on turn 2, or you're not shifting her for 2, just in general, depending on what turn you are, her body is quite weak for a 5-drop. I understand that she will be dodging more of the power-based removal that Robin and the Beast are gonna be just like eating face first. But the thing is also, what we have to mention is the stock on Madame Medusa is very, very low, either in Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire, that it lets you play those Robins and Beasts and whatnot a little more safely right now in Steel Song. And it's definitely in Steel Song, because you don't have those.
No, you don't have those in Dwarven Mine.
In Dwarven Mine, and even in aggro. Sometimes I've seen people running a couple Robins just to cheese, but the main fact that you're playing Robin is to have an early shift to Sing a Whole New World or bigger songs.
Yeah.
In Steel Song, this is the main attraction to Robin in your list, in your deck building. So yeah, but I think the Queen is interesting, and again, I'm gonna say I feel silly not having considered her, but I think I kind of stand on that hill of like, it's the body's quite underwhelming for even in the current meta, and is going to get challenged really easily, even by the I would say the mid range bodies of Dwarven Mine and Ember Steel aggro. So it kind of nullifies the purpose of playing that shift early. And again, the deck that would benefit the most from it is probably Steel Song.
Yeah.
Because again, you would want to be singing your big songs early on. Maybe it's maybe she comes out too early and turn 2 Whole New World is kind of awkward.
I don't see it so much in the turn 2 Whole New World kind of way as much as we're not seeing big creature or damage based action as much. Not left steel present at the moment in the meta. So her 3 power apart from Calhoun won't be threatened as much early on, so that's why I was kind of curious.
The thing is,
but she's a 2-quester if I remember correctly.
Yes. Also, the interesting thing, and I wanted to touch upon it and forgot to include it in my notes, so thank you for reminding me. There's a strategy right now that I'm going to be talking in the next sequence a lot more. In this current metagame, 1-drops are really essential. And this is coming from me, the guy notorious for cutting 1-drops in his mid-range lists. It's really important to be running 1-drops nowadays. I want to say the only exception is if you're Ruby Sapphire. Because nowadays, if you're able to go 1-drop on turn 1 and 2 1-drop on turn 2, some decks don't have the tools to deal with it. And this is a good point with your queen. If we were to be running more grab your swords in maybe Steel Song or whatever deck we want to build around it, this would deal cleanly with this start. The thing is now this start has become very, very popular for all the Ember Steel decks. It has become quite popular with the Ruby Amethyst as well.
Yep.
They're upping their 1-drop count to about 12. I've seen Kendall Burdett's deck running Olaf's.
Wow.
So and also the next deck that we're gonna talk about plays a plethora of 1-drops just for that to be able to go very wide and try to go this way. So I feel it's very interesting to say that maybe the queen into grab your sword might be a very interesting line, because you kind of leave your opponent dead in the water.
Especially if they're expecting to Fox or Snake or whatever. Being able to quickly remove their early threats with the Amethyst package is often a good way to stall them, because they rely on those shifts. Not those shifts, those bounces quite a bit.
Exactly.
And that's probably something I'll be testing on my end.
Yeah, well, maybe we have figured it out way too late for this championship. Or maybe people will have figured it out. We'll see. We'll be talking about
I'll
this.
feel like a genius if ever the queen wins the championship.
So good. So the key cards for Steel Song I wanted to name is Ariel Spectacular Singer, which is kind of like the glue holding all your deck together.
Of course.
Whole New World, like I said, it's not dead. It's still there, people. Believe it. Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, which is one of your other key singers to be able to sing Let the Storm Rage On and String of Raging Fire. And finally, Rapunzel gifted with Healing, which is still to this day, after a full year and a half of Lorcana, still one of the most broken cards. Just remove all damage from a guy, draw 3 cards, no biggies. Now it's a clock also. It has it all, you know?
Yep.
And for the Dwarven Mine variant, I have to name the 7 Dwarves Mine, which is kind of your engine, which is very important to note for people at home. I'm sure contestants in the Continentals already know about it. You can only use the effect once per turn. It's when the first character is moved there that you can dish the damage out, which is either 1 for any character or 2 if it's a knight.
Oh.
So it's really once a turn. You cannot just start machine gunning the board with your...
Unless you have more than one.
Yes, that's a good strategy actually. In testing, I at some point I had 3, and I was just like boing 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 boing, and just like machine gunning the board on the other side. With my next card that I want to name in the key cards is Happy, the Joyous Knight. I think his name is. It's a 1-drop that just gains evasive. Also very good to challenge something that is very sadly kind of dead from the format right now. We'll tell about it later on, but like it's very good at going to challenge for a Diablo. Then you have Doc for your draw power that will will make you discard your hand. Generally, you play him when you're empty-handed and draw 2 cards.
Yep.
And finally, Daisy Duck, Donald's Date. That is kind of the Goblin Guide for our Magic players at home. The Goblin Guide of Lorcana, which is a 1/4. Quest for 2. Whenever she quests, your opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character, they put it in their hands. If it's a non-character card, it goes to the bottom. Really great against Ruby Sapphire sometimes to just like disrupt their flow of cards.
Yeah, and we also have like a lot of our contenders, both in Ruby Amethyst, Ruby Sapphire, and Dwarves Mine. There's a lot of non-characters in those lists, so the hit rate is not as ominous as it might seem sometimes.
Exactly. You're not just gonna give your opponent all of the cards all of the time.
And then with the rise of Genie and Amethyst in general with it, and the arrival of Diablo as a 1-drop that will draw you a card almost no matter what, some people started varying the removal from Ruby to Steel. So we've seen a little bit more of a rise of Amethyst Steel.
So yeah, I see it that way. That's how I want to present the deck. Take your really good Amethyst cards from Ruby Amethyst, like the Genie, the Bounce package, and everything. Take your really good Steel interaction and some of you like your really resilient guys from the Amber Steel archetype. Mash them together into a really efficient and really resilient aggro deck. So this is what, generally the most successful lists have been. Amethyst Steel is an aggro deck. Sometimes it's more mid-range. Some people have tried to spice it up with different card choices. But it is definitely an aggro deck that really, really thrives on that that strategy I just named in the last segment, where you're going probably turn 1 1-drop, turn 2 2 1-drops. You have a large board now, and it's going to be hard to deal with them. Either way, your 2-drops also are really, really resilient. All of your 2-drops are like 3 powered, and sometimes have like
me and Calhoun mostly.
Yeah, so they're all 3/3s except for Calhoun. That is a 3/2 with resist 1, which is better in some way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. It has seen some, I want to say, success in the past month of tournament. It wasn't something that we had on the radar in Paris, the EU Continentals. It was really, I want to say, an embryo of a deck. People didn't have tuned lists as of yet, and even now I feel that even the most popular lists are not final drafts.
Yeah, it's probably the deck I've been toying with the most recently, and finding the right flavor for it, I guess, is where it becomes the most interesting.
Because even if it's an aggro deck, the where your spice, I want to say, and where your like personality is gonna live is in the mid to late game cards. Yep. Do you want to be playing Elsa? Like, you're always going to be wanting to play Genie. That's about
for sure.
That's about sure. But then I've seen people playing some Gontus from the new set. I've seen people playing Hades from the new set, the 3/4 Ninkable for 6, that Quest for 3, and that whenever during your opponent's turn one of your character dies, you gain 2 lore, a lore or 2 lore. I never remember.
I don't remember that card, to be completely honest. We can look it up and I'll show it on screen.
Yeah. So anyway, it gains. I think we've been whispered that it gains 2 lore every time a guy dies during your opponent's turn. So yeah, very, very good card. Very good top end. But then, do you still want to be playing, I don't know, Tinkerbell. Like,
Yeah.
how many rabbits do you want to run on the behalf of your genies? How much of the bounce package do you want to be running?
Do you want to run the library, and if so, how many?
Exactly. Do you run and then along came Zeus? You're always running String of Raging Fire because, as I said, you're going very wide. So it is a good card to be considering. So the deck is again very flexible. You can build it however you want for however metagame you want it. The thing is just I think it hasn't just found a really good footing to 100% take a hold of a metagame and just cement itself into it. This is why also I haven't mentioned how much of it I expect to be seeing, but I think it's going to be about 5 to 10% of the field.
Fair enough.
And 10% would be very generous in my opinion. 10% would be a full, I don't know, like 11-ish players, 12 player. So yeah, I think that would be probably a lot of Amethyst Steel, but it has its fans, people running it for the past weeks. So I wouldn't be so surprised about it.
Yeah, and compared to the Dwarves Mine, it has the advantage of being just a bit less aggro, but drawing so many more cards. Like, you're able to rebuild a board time after time when they wipe it and always have something else, thanks to the library, thanks to the genie, the rabbit. Like, you're always refilling your hand, and I feel like if someone finds the right mix for it, it has the potential to do really well against a lot of the current matchups.
Oh, he's gonna be one of the big players. As soon as one good version, like good master version, has been figured out, I think it's just gonna take its spot within the pantheon. So the key cards for this deck, we've kind of named them. Genie, Wish Fulfilled, again, is probably one of the best cards from set number 6, so not very surprising to see it there. We have the Diablo Obedience Servant, I think. This is the 1-drop, the 0/1 that draws a card. You have, again, Madame Mim Fox, that is an enabler. You have Doc, that we've named for the Dwarven Mine, that is also your draw engine. Well, your early game, I want to say mid-game draw engine, when you're like all tapped out of cards in hand, just drop a Doc, draw 2, and then start rolling again. But one of the cards I've seen a lot, and it's kind of a mainstay of the deck. And this is kind of the gotcha card that the deck runs for. Generally for the for the 1-drops on the other side.
Yep.
Is Fire the Cannon. So
it is impressive the work that card can do in removing the 3-drop Sisu, in preventing those little Churnabox followers or Cinderella Sensational from being able to do their thing on turn 2. But even in like bigger, I want to say, matches, there's a few times I've just fired 2 on a Hiram and finished it, or used it to like finish taking down a big Sisu, or that little 2 damage for 1 lore. As weird as it seemed the first time I looked and built the deck, is really not something you're ever gonna waste, which is pretty impressive.
So, and it really like takes the winds off the sail. Haha, sail jokes for Sail the Ezra at Sea. So it's really good at dealing with that starting strategy on the other side, because you're probably, if you're not trying to go 1-drop into 2 1-drops, maybe you're just gonna do. They're going to do 1-drop, you're going to fire the cannon, and then you're dropping 2 1-drops. That is still quite the tempo shift.
Yeah.
So, and then we're kind of coming up to the rest
of the field. Yeah.
Of the field.
The smaller players.
So I want to say, like, I kind of feel some old favorites, such as Emerald Steel, Emerald Amethyst, and like Sapphire Steel have kind of been phased out. I'm pretty sure some players are gonna still be bringing those favorites. I know like Dale Bailey though will be on the Emerald Steel. Pretty sure about it. I'm pretty sure Michael Lamb will be bringing a Sapphire Steel to the table. These guys are known as deck specialists for a reason, and they probably have tuned their decks really well to the metagame. But I'm pretty sure also there are some very mad scientist choice of cards in their decks that not the common of mortals will not be able to figure out before the tournament. Like I said, I made a face because Emerald Steel is probably one of my favorites in coming to archetypes, and maybe I'm just like spoiling, or maybe I'm not. Maybe it's just a strategy. Anyway, of what I'm playing over there, but I feel that there is no right build right now. It struggles so much against Genie, whether you are the Emerald Steel discard card, the discard build. If you're the more Floodborn damage based build, or anything in between. I've tried them all and was not convinced by any of them. So
you heard it here first. The bird is dead.
It is quite impressive to say that the bird, that Diablo, that was such a menace in like set 4 and set 5, is probably not good enough anymore.
I'll be honest though, joking aside, it is refreshing to come into this season and not be overwhelmed by discard and green steel Diablo as we were for the past 2 sets. It is a breath of fresh air, and I'm sure it will come back around at some point. The card is still busted, is still really good, and whenever the metagame will favor it, you'll see it come back. I'm not worried, but it is still refreshing right now to have a little bit less Emerald, as much as I'm personally an Emerald fan.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird to say that because you now feel that there's one less color in your color pie for the game. Like, Emerald decks have really been struggling. My next point was like that Emerald Amethyst is not aggro enough anymore for like Dwarven Mine builds and Amethyst Steel builds. It's not mid-range enough to be competing with Steel Song and Ruby Amethyst, and is kind of just getting eaten up by control. So you're kind of in a world where you're fighting tooth and nail for, like, scratching for every win you want to be getting, and you're just not doing as well as every other deck is doing. So this is kind of like the position of it, and this is kind of the position of the color as a whole, because, you know, people do not care as much about Diablo if you're a Diablo deck. Clarabelle is not as present as she was at the end of
last set
of set number 5. So, you know, that's about it. And also, like, the other deck I mentioned that was like in the rest that we might see a few copies of, but we're not gonna see like many copies of, is Sapphire Steel. Like, it's so hard when you're a control-ish mid-range deck to not have access to a card like Maui Half Shark that blue-red was able to pick up and just really bank on.
Although, to be fair, and I'm going to be a bit of a dissident voice on that deck, the Jim Hawkins package against this wider early game offering is really, really good. Like, I don't know if the deck is good enough to be strong, but against the variety of 1-drops that we have there, I don't want to say slower, but the inclusion of the Jim Hawkins package have been really good in managing those early threats and slowing down the aggro decks.
Yeah, the thing is that package really has to be paired with blue to be, I want to say, effective.
Oh yeah, it has to be in blue steel.
and that's the thing. I think the rest of the deck struggles with its identity. Like, you're probably an items deck. You're probably trying to I want to say combo kill with Ariel. I don't remember her name, but the 6-drop uninkable Ariel from
Ward.
With Ward that gains 2 lore pips for if you have more items. So, you know, that this is kind of what you want to be doing to win, to be different than Ruby Sapphire, but, you know, it's Treasure Collector. I think that's
I think that's the one.
Okay, yes. So Treasure Collector, but that's the thing. Like, it's really your way to step aside from like Ruby Sapphire Shadow, because you're still in a Hiram deck. You like sometimes you're still
Oh
playing.
yeah, you're a Hiram Tematoa deck at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, I want to say, like, even though you're playing a whole new world, you're trying to disrupt. It's not like a good disruption. You're still refilling your opponent with a full hand. Maybe not a great one. Maybe you just made him discard like his B preps or whatnot. But you have to be kind of lucky on this. Like it's.
I feel like it's probably more. You're probably switching to more of a mill strategy against something like Ruby Sapphire than you're trying to really disrupt the hand at that point.
Yeah, and then you're still trying to probably build a board with where Aerial is relevant and trying, as I said, to combo kill with like Quest Aerial, Lucky Dime, Activate Dime, and then you just gain 10 from that whole interaction.
Yep.
And then that's about it for the rest. My last point here was my 0.5 that I mentioned at the beginning.
Yeah, which is those are the known decks. Those are the ones we're aware of that we've seen in tournaments that have been there historically. But there's always the possibility of something new emerging. Maybe Sapphire Emerald combo kill. Don't play that. I've lost to it, but like it's more of a funny deck than a good deck. But there's the possibility of these unknown decks or color combinations.
Yeah, because as I have named the section here, it's innovation ? So, because the reason why I want to include it and to talk about it is that in the American tournaments as of now, we have been known, the Americans, to be really more innovative about our play patterns and our deck choices than the Europeans have been. The European Continental was, as we said in the video that we haven't released, it was not bafflingly surprising, Mm-hmm. It was just like, oh, these are known value decks that are showing up in known value quantity, except for like blue red that was like more represented than the rest. But still, there were no like groundbreaking decks. There were no groundbreaking strategies, new cards in those decks. Everything was very expected.
Yeah.
So I would like to see if someone comes up with something in this tournament in the United States to see if they can kind of shake things up, because we had Zan Sayed that won Vegas with the resurgence of Emerald Steel when it was at his lowest point. I have to name Josh Paltray that won the Atlanta DLC when it was back when we could only play a set 1, 2, and 3 with Amber Amethyst deck.
Yep.
Even I was kind of considered as a mad scientist for not playing a very discard-based build and more of a Floodborne build in Atlanta. So, and like we've seen people on stuff like Red Steel going for top 64. If I remember correctly, it was in Seattle or Vegas again. So I want to see some innovation just going from there. I don't know if it's gonna be winning the whole tournament, but at least doing like top 16, top 8, it would be really interesting. I had in my notes here that like we have 3 full color combinations that have never really put a competitive deck on the map, which is Ruby Steel. We have Sapphire Emerald as well that never really managed to get there, and Amber Sapphire that kind of was a thing for a hot second in set number 1 and then just like set number 2 came out and it's just like dead in the water. So,
and it was never heard of again
for now. So yeah, so this is what I would feel that it would be very interesting for innovation, adding to what we already know for this current meta that we're going to be playing for a little while again in Store Championships after this coming weekend.
Store Championships that are coming out throughout January and February, so watch your local game store schedule for when those are happening. A pretty cool Scar card and playmats this turnaround. definitely more playable than Mirabelle, even though we're probably not seeing it at the Continentals due to its restriction, but definitely will be going after one or a few of those. And until then, I mean, I'm going to follow your journey and the team's journey from here. You're about to board a plane a few days from now. We'll wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
For the tournament. You and all of the team will be cheering you on. Those at home, tell us what you're expecting or what you would play if you were going to a last chance qualifier to try to enter this tournament. And I guess until then, we'll see you on the other side of that tournament and keep questing.